Good morning. Good morning. Sorry for the false start there. I was online for a bit and then offline. I was trying to figure something out as far as what I wanted to display on the screen and had to switch it off for a second. But hello, if you're on, if you're watching, good morning. Hopefully things are coming through okay. I've got a new computer set up here. This is not a new computer, but it's the one that I mentioned a few times that I thought I could fix, and I did. I got it fixed, so it's working now. And trying to use it here to see if it will work better for streaming. Seemed to go okay in the last hour, so hopefully it continues to go okay. If you have any issues with the quality or the audio, then let me know so I can try to adjust those. But overall, it seems to be doing better than my laptop, as far as I can tell. So again, let me know how it goes. All right. So I'll give people a few more minutes to get online. Let's see. I haven't actually figured out how to set up the two webcams on this computer yet. The camera that I had pointing at the bird feeder, it's not currently active. But I just made an adjustment to the bird feeder. I refilled the bird feeder and then I also lowered the bowl on top of it. I think I need a bigger bowl because I was looking at my neighbor, her yard, and she has several bird feeders with like bowls on top, but they're much larger with respect to the size of the feeder, so they essentially sit around the top of it, and I think that'll work a lot better. But I don't have a bowl that big that I can drill a hole in, so I might not be able to do that exact method, but I continue to monitor the bird feeder situation and make sure that it's feeding birds more than squirrels. So since I refilled it, I've seen quite a few birds come by. There is a cedar waxwing right there, and there was a cowbird out there a few minutes ago. And there is a nesting pair of woodpeckers in the tree, so I've seen them come and go a lot lately, but not yet this morning. But I think there's also a family of cowbirds because I keep seeing them. And cowbirds are cool. They just look like little brown, like blackbirds with brown heads, but they have a really unusual call that sounds like water dropping into a bucket. And I've been hearing it around the yard, and we finally figured out what it is. So anyway, sound okay, hopefully. If there's any issues, let me know. Today, here's what I have in mind. I thought we could talk about, just as a general topic, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the new flexible grading options that have come out. So let me post that as a question in Slack, and you can discuss it there if you'd like. So we did this already in the previous section. You can join on there as well. Okay. Have you, and I see Austin typing about the new flexible grading options. Any questions? What do you think? I'm not used to this keyboard. I have some typos. Hang on. Grading. Okay, great. Thanks, Creative Sparks 24. Yeah, so what do you think? I mean, this could just be general thoughts or specific questions or issues, whatever. Okay, so Austin's question is, so if a class is made pass-fail under the new option, what requirements would it no longer fulfill? Will the language still count in progress to the next level? Sciences, do writing, speaking still count major requirements? Yeah, pretty much a lot of options, questions there, Austin. So, okay, so Austin, lots of questions there. So one thing to be clear is that this new flexible option is, as I understand, in addition to the pass-fail option. So what that means, Austin, is that under the normal universe, you can take a letter grade or you can switch to pass-fail. If you pass a pass-fail class, you don't get prerequisite requirement or major or anything else. if you fail it, it counts like a normal F, and so it would affect your GPA, but the pass doesn't affect your GPA. So really a pass-fail is usually just a last resort option. That's how I advise my students. It's not something that works for everyone. So whenever, initially the announcement was that you can take as many classes as you want this semester, pass-fail. And because normally you'd be limited to one, but this semester that rule was waived, so you can take as many as you want pass-fail. I don't think that's a good option anymore. I think that the new flexible option is a much better choice for classes that you would normally consider switching to pass-fail. So let me kind of talk through. Yeah, it looks like just kind of seeing your thoughts in here. Well, Ian, it should help seniors, but not as, maybe differently, I guess. So I see what you're saying. But let me explain my understanding, and let me see if I can clarify it. I'm still a little foggy on some of the details myself, especially in some of the implications that Austin was asking about. So let me kind of see what I can make. This is the email that you all received, and so under this new flexible grading option, there are 3 outcomes for your grade. Like, so you take a class and you have one of 3 grades, or these aren't grades, but these are outcomes. So either you get credit, you get P19, or you get no credit. And none of these will impact your GPA. And if I understand correctly, that's a really significant difference from pass-fail, because failing a pass-fail class does impact your GPA negatively. But I think under this schema, failing to get credit for a class will not affect your GPA. So that's maybe a good thing. And let's see. Yeah, that's probably right, Brian. That's basically I'm typing in here too, basically my recommendation as well. Which is that if you see a class that is likely to improve your GPA, you should keep it as a letter grade. And that's fine, except for, you can switch up until April 24th. Okay, so anyway, so credit means that in terms of what the work you do and whatever you do for the class, it's equivalent to a C or higher. So that means that it counts as a prerequisite for later classes. It fulfills any major requirements or any general education requirements. So that would include WISI, experiential learning, art, literature, and performance, whatever the other gen ed requirements are that a class fulfills would be fulfilled by a class that was given this CRT grade. All right, so that's a good outcome. That could be a class. I mean, well, that's what that means. So this one, P19, is the tricky one because it's for those classes where you switch into this flexible schema, but you don't earn, or the professor feels you don't earn whatever the credit is for that, whatever the C is. This is the iffy part of this whole thing, and this is definitely the part that requires, we have to wait and see how certain departments will implement this, but it will count for general education. Many major requirements, and that's the many there is what's kind of tricky about it, because it may not count for some, and it also does not count it does not fulfill prerequisite requirements. I think that this distinction is here. I wasn't part of this conversation that created these rules, but my hunch is that this distinction is here there are certain classes in biology and chemistry, I think, where you have to actually get a C, you have to get a C in order to complete the prerequisite requirement. That's not the case universally. That's only the case for certain majors, but I suspect that those majors are the ones who insisted on having this distinction here. I'm guessing, but ultimately that still could be an okay option. And then finally, the no credit option is just sort of you get no credit for the class, but also you don't get an F for the class. So I think that's definitely where it's better than a pass-fail. I still think the default, for me, what I would recommend is giving you, I would recommend keeping your letter grade as the default, and then if you see yourself getting into trouble that last week, then you can switch. Also, there's a lot of things that are still being hashed out about this, so kind of waiting to see is certainly an option. So let me tell you about this class. This class, DGST 101, when I teach it, the average grade is an A- anyway. maybe a B plus, but I think certainly an A minus or A. Like most, in other words, most people get A's or A minuses in this class anyway. So I certainly imagine that that will be the case this semester as well. So I will recommend that you keep the letter grade for this class so that it can help your GPA. If you decide just you don't even want to bother with that, or if that's not a real big issue for you, then I think it could also be reasonable to switch to the flexible option to take some of the stress out of it. If that's helpful for you, then by all means, whatever helps. But I will recommend the letter grade and help you get an A if possible. So that's my goal anyway. Yes, Austin, that's my understanding. Yes. Yes, that's my understanding. It's like a PA or P, but a higher standard, and unlike a P, a CRT. Nothing's satisfying. So yeah, again, that's my understanding, but we're still kind of waiting to see a little bit on that. But that's my reading of this. So. Okay, so if you have any questions about this class specifically, of course, I can answer those and how it goes. But ultimately, my answer really is still just kind of keep the letter grade as a recommendation. And I think that might be the case for many of your classes as well. I really think the goal here is to give you flexibility. The trick with flexibility is that means options, and options can be confusing. And so that's where there's sort of a downside to this whole approach. But I definitely do think that, most of your, I can't speak for everybody, but I'm pretty sure most faculty want to make this as helpful as possible, like help you have as good a time as possible given the circumstances, and understanding that this is an incredibly stressful semester for all of us. We want to get you all through this as with as good of an outcome as possible. I think that's a good analogy, Ashley, and that may be, I think that's a good comparison, because that's true that those can fulfill major requirements or prereqs, but they don't affect your GPA. Okay, so feel free to keep that conversation going. I'm going to move into some other things, but if you have other questions about the grading, definitely put them in Slack as we go into it. So many of you are done with your archaeology projects and you've submitted them in Canvas. If you haven't yet, then you should, I guess, but there's no real rush on that, except that we are going to do some other things in this class as well. And the sooner you get the archaeology project done, the sooner you can move on to other things. I am going to be moving on to other things in the streams, so you should follow the streams anyway, so that you don't kind of get lost with this next batch of material. And this next batch, this is the last batch. This is it. So I want to talk through what that's going to be and give you a sense of the schedule over the next couple weeks. So today I'm going to give you an overview of the digital methodology project, and then over the next several live streams, I'm going to take you through different options for that project. So unlike the other modules that we did where I gave you a bunch of choices, you had to pick one right away and then spend 2 weeks on that or whatever, right now I'm going to give you a much slower introduction to the different options here. And with each of those introductions, I'm going to give you kind of a small scale version of the kind of project you might do for that as a thing to work through during a class session or during a live stream, or on your own later if you're going to do it asynchronously. So that's the plan, and I want to explain it here. It's in, unlike what I did with the archaeology, I just went ahead and updated the assignment description for this third module. So what you see here is correct and current. A couple of things I might just edit for clarity, but that's the basics here are correct and true. So remember, we looked initially at digital creativity, and you chose a module based on something you were interested in, maybe animated GIFs or interactive fiction. For digital culture, you chose a different area of digital culture to try to learn about. For digital methodology, you're going to practice actually trying to do something, So this one has a bit of a higher technical threshold, or these modules do, and a bit more of an applicable outcome, like something that actually is deliverable and that means something. You'll choose one of, I think I have 5 options currently. I might add a 6th option. But you have several options to choose from. Within each of these modules, there is some pretty specific kind of end product in mind, and a little bit more instruction built into them to explain how to get there. Once you've gotten there, once you've completed your experiment, your project, whatever it is, I would also like for you to share the results of that in a web page on your website. Now, this can be like when I do this assignment traditionally, this is a static HTML page that I teach you how to code. I'm not going to do that for this project unless you want some tutoring. I can explain HTML, but I am also in this version of the assignment, I'm also okay with a WordPress page or some other just piece of content there to explain what you found in your project. This is more than a blog entry. This is different than a blog entry. This is more of an essay where you're saying, here's something interesting, here's the visualization of it or whatever you create, and then here's what I think that means. So it essentially is an essay built around a digital inquiry of some sort using one of these methodologies that I'm going to show you here. So that's the basics of the project. There will still be at least 2 blog entries and an expectation that you use the Slack channel just like the other modules, but the deliverable, the outcome should be that web page, that either static HTML page or the WordPress page. Of course, we'll talk a lot more about all those steps here, but here's the basic schedule of how we're going to get there. So today, this is where we are, Monday, March 30th. I'm giving you the general introduction to the project today. For the next several live streams, I'm going to focus on one of these in turn. I think I will probably start with text analysis on Wednesday. I may have said digital journalism, but I don't know. Basically, there's not going to be homework before these. It'll just be tune in, and then I'll give you something to work on, and then that's it. And then we'll move on to the next thing. Then after I've gone through all those, then you'll choose which one you want to focus on in more detail. So you will have had some experience with all of these in some depth, or at least a better depth than what I can give you today, before you actually have to commit to a module to work on. So hopefully that'll work. And then once you've made that choice, you will commit some time working on it on your own and coordinating and collaborating or whatever with your Slack cohort, and of course with consulting with me as needed. As you're working on that, I'll be giving instruction about how to create the web page part of it. If that's if that's something you're going to do with HTML, or if you want to just work with WordPress, I will take you through that part of it in the live streams to follow. And then this is all due April 24th. So last day of class, last day to get it done. All right, so yeah. Any questions you have about the overall project, then please put them in Slack. Otherwise, I'm going to go through each of the main options here and talk through what that might look like in a project. And for some of these, I do have just an example I can show you, but mostly that kind of demonstration by example will take place when I give you the more in-depth introduction to these. So let's start with text analysis. So all of these, by the way, before I get into text analysis, all of these different modules here are really drawn from a discipline that is usually called digital humanities. And that's, like, I call this course digital studies. We call the minor digital studies. There's a Venn diagram where there's digital studies and then digital humanities, and they mostly overlap. It's just we don't use that term here at UMW for historical reasons and a couple other reasons that aren't important. But digital humanities is where we're asking questions about what it means to be humans using tools that are digital. And so text analysis is a kind of digital humanities approach that is popular, or at least it's on the rise within literary studies. And this is something that I'm teaching an entire class on this semester, English 451, a senior seminar. So if this is something that you find interesting, eventually you, of course, can consider taking that class. But basically what happens here is, given a text, let's say a novel or a group of novels by an author, or let's say every poem written in the 19th century, or whatever you want, what are some of the things that you can figure out about that set of text using a computer? Writing a program to extract features or identify themes or look at characters. I mean, there's lots of different things you can do. And it's a whole field of study. There's books and journals and all kinds of things that people have worked on and produced in this field to try to figure out the kinds of things that are that computers can be useful for in this field. So here's a couple examples of text analysis using computers. And this one's pretty intuitive. I think this is Google's Ngram Viewer. This is a type of computer-based text analysis. And what they've done is they've got on this horizontal axis down here, you can see 1800 to 2000. This is the entire Google Books corpus. So everything that they have in their corpus, which includes nonfiction, fiction, newspapers, all kinds of things. All we're seeing here is the rate of occurrence of particular phrases. So in this case, we've got the Yankees versus the Cubs, the Red Sox, the Tigers, and the Braves. And you can see that over time, New York Yankees have consistently been mentioned more frequently, starting with the 1940s or so. So that's an interesting thing, right? I mean, that's something that you could develop further questions based on this. Like you might want to be like, well, what was going on in here in the 1950s? There seems like there was a surge, and then they kind of leveled off for a while. So why was that? And then there's this huge surge going up through the 80s to the 90s. I don't know a ton about the Yankees, but I feel like that coincides with their rise to becoming the most successful baseball franchise, and that seems to be, that the rate of mentioning over time probably matches or is similar to their rate of success as a team. So that's the kind of thing that you can correlate with maybe. You can try other things as well, right? Any word or phrase. Ngram just means a phrase, so that's all that we're doing here. But we can try different ones. Here's a popular one like Dracula. Gotta spell it right. Versus Frankenstein. Versus werewolf. And then we can just hit enter and then search it. And then, yeah, okay, wow. So werewolf is way bigger than Dracula and Frankenstein. I didn't realize that. Let's try to take it. Maybe werewolf is a more generic term, whereas Dracula and Frankenstein are more, their character names. So, okay, so that's interesting. So Dracula has this big surge in the 1930s and then drops off, where Frankenstein becomes more popular for the 1940s and 50s. Probably coinciding with those Hammer films, the old black and white monster movies. But Frankenstein then kind of stays pretty level, whereas Dracula has these ups and downs. I think the 90s here, this probably goes with Anne Rice books, the Interview with a Vampire book series. So interesting. Interesting to see how these things change over time. You can also try text analysis with a specific author's books, and this is a tool here called Voyant, voyanttools.org, and I just need to adjust this here. And what this does is you give it a corpus, basically a folder full of text documents, and this is what it looks like with Jane Austen's books in it. But the idea normally is you'd find your own corpus, your own bunch of books. And then Voyant gives you all these different ways of viewing that corpus. And there are lots of others actually, but it has these 5 kind of window panes, and then you can switch out these window panes for other visualizations. So this is a cloud view. It's pretty intuitive. Like the words that are more popular are bigger. Some of these are more, like I don't totally get what they're doing, but let's see. What's bubble? I don't know what bubble lines is. Okay, great. Yeah, a lot of times I look at these and I don't know what I'm looking at, but that's kind of the work of this textual analysis module, if you choose to do it, is like understanding what these different things are doing to the text that you're giving it. So that's pretty easy to use, but then the idea, the hard part with this is in the interpretation, like taking the visualization that you get from Voyant and then building an argument around it or an insight derived from it. I just noticed this one this morning when I was looking at this with Jane Austen. You look at the word think and the way that it occurs, it's interesting that it occurs as one of the most frequent terms in the book, in her books generally, and there is a slight upward trend if you look at it. Maybe that's not enough of a trend to be significant, but I feel like there is a slight trend upward, and so you might hypothesize or conclude even from that there is an increasing interest in introspection or in her characters. But you should also probably look at it in context, because if you could also see the word think being used as equivocation, so maybe her characters become less confident over time. And then to kind of test that, you might look at it here to see the context for the word think, to see which kind of phrases it's occurring in. So, I mean, there's a lot of other things you can do to kind of correlate these different tools, and basically playing around with it until you find something interesting is what most people do for text analysis, if they're going to do that one. But again, I'll give you a more detailed kind of sample project with that one. So digital journalism, this one's probably the hardest. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. It's okay. I don't need those tabs anymore. Digital journalism is probably the hardest because journalism is a time-consuming process. You have to do some kind of investigation. You have to get sort of direct access to information sometimes, and then you try to explain it in a way. So this has some different examples of digital journalism. Usually, the digital part has to do with how it's presented or how the information is put out there. So one sort of classic example of this is a piece called Snowfall, published by the New York Times. The New York Times does, in general, a very good job with interactive stories, and this was an early and well-cited example.
I had no ability to control what was happening.
So you have video embedded along with it. You can see this is pretty cool. This thing kind of slides into view, visualizing the terrain as you are learning about it. You've got different kinds of images. So it's a media-rich essay, basically, that uses the presentation to help pull you into the story and convince you of things or help you understand what's important about it. So it's a masterful piece of journalism, and a lot of its power has to do with its presentation and its media richness. These things aren't just sort of stuck in here randomly. They're actually quite elegant and well done in a way to help you achieve greater clarity about the story as you scroll down the page and start learning from it. So that's a good example. There's others this one I like to show because I think it's funny. This is a story about Hampton Creek, which is a mayonnaise company, I guess, or they were trying to make vegan mayonnaise. And the story here has to do with like mismanagement and insider trading and things. But what I find hilarious about this is, like, you can see my cursor has been replaced by this napkin. And it's my preview is buffering a little bit, so I'm waiting to make sure you can see the napkin. Yeah, and so what you can do is you can wipe off the mayonnaise off the guy, and that's, I guess, funny. But as you scroll down, like, even just the background color here is kind of mayonnaise-y, and like the titles have the large text has this kind of curvy mayonnaise-y look to it. Even the headings have these like pulsating like blobs of mayo behind them. Lots of ways in which the presentation of this is also really rich, and using the HTML, using the web context to really get the idea across. Okay, so looks like my bitrate is struggling a little bit, so if you all are having an issue, hopefully this is being recorded okay, so we can look at it later. But that's maybe just looking at Snowfall took up too much memory. Let me just type in here just in case you all can't even hear me asking the question. How's the video coming through? Looks like my bit rate is struggling. Okay, so there are more options in here that I will attempt to show you as I can. Okay, so let's take a look at mapping. Several people are typing. Video not so much. Okay, let me see. Okay, I'm going to try to lower the resolution on my stream. I had it set pretty high, so let me see if I can drop the resolution and see if that improves it. I don't know. I might have to restart the stream to change the resolution. Yeah, I do. I can't change the resolution in the middle of a stream. Okay, so I don't know how it's being recorded. I guess that's the question. Like, if it's being recorded decently, then there's no reason to restart it. But okay, you know what? This isn't going to take too long. I'm going to restart the stream. I'm going to stop it, change the resolution, and hopefully that'll kind of clear it out. Okay, so actually, you guys are saying it's fine now. Well, yeah, Austin, that'll certainly save it on your end, but also, like, I can reduce it for me too. Okay, well, if it's fine for most people, I'm gonna plow ahead. Because mainly, like if it gets recorded, okay, then that's what matters. I'll keep an eye on it, and then I think maybe when I pulled up the snowfall piece, maybe that just was asking too much of this computer. Okay, well I'll proceed. I'm almost done anyway, so let me get to this. So mapping, this is another kind of digital engagement you can do with the tool, and I don't have a ready example of this, but this is where uh, you are using a map to explain or explore something, and what was I going to say? Oh yeah, so the example I have of this one, I can't find it. The student took this website down for some reason, but it was a great project. What he did was took a map of started with a map of every county in the eastern half of the United States, like every county in every state, and then he color coded them so that on the map they displayed in a different color, and the color code told you about the origins of the name for that county. So like counties with a French origin or a Spanish origin or an English origin or named after a specific person all had a different color to indicate that different status. And then there was another one status was made up names, and it turned out there's a whole bunch of counties, especially I think in Michigan, where someone, a cartographer or politician at some point, just made up a bunch of names, like nonsense words essentially, and that's how those counties got their names. I thought that was such a weird backstory for that. So that was really interesting map-based arguments. I think what other people like to do with this is take some text, like Mrs. Dalloway is the example here for this assignment. I don't know if this page is still up here. It's from a while ago, but this is where a group of students worked on the novel Mrs. Dalloway, and yeah, they built a map of locations in it. That's an option, obviously, and that's something, if you know a book really well, if there's a book or a group of books maybe that you already know really well, that you can kind of off the top of your head name all the places in it, that's where a map might be a really useful kind of tool that you could do. I've had other students do projects where they map, well, like one guy last semester did a map of different locations with police-involved shootings, and that was a pretty sobering kind of map, but a really useful kind of way to see patterns or see where these things are happening is pretty interesting. Yeah, okay, so mapping, pretty fun. So image visualization takes a bit more explanation, and in fact I'm going to change the name of this module to cultural analytics because that's the term that more people are starting to use when they do this kind of thing. And this is where you are going to, if you do this, try to understand some large set of visual culture and understand it at a macro scale. So there's a couple of examples here that hopefully help explain that. One is the movie barcode, and this is what the person who makes this website has done is take every frame from, in this case, Star Wars Episode 8, and then squeeze it all together into so what is left looks like a barcode. Pretty interesting looking for long movies like that, but also just for shorter sequences, you often get pretty interesting patterns. This is what the opening titles look like in this view for Star Wars Episode 8. So pretty interesting. And the way to do this is you start off with a video file, and then you run some code that will extract a frame every second or some whatever interval you decide is important. And then you end up with a folder full of maybe tens of thousands of images, and then you write some code that puts them all together. I've given you some of that here in the module description. This is for if you're using a Mac, you can install something called Homebrew, and then use Homebrew to install something called FFmpeg. And it's pretty step-by-step, but I don't have a Windows computer to try this on, so I'm not as good at explaining how to do things on Windows. But if this module is something you want to do and you can't figure out how to get that, you can't get a video and get those things extracted the way that you want to do that work, that's something I can help with. Like you can just sort of send me the video file and I can do it for you. I'm happy to do that. That shouldn't be the part that you get stuck on. Like that's something that several ways to do it. I would love for you to be able to figure out how to do it because it's pretty interesting. You can also do it with VLC if you want, but ultimately, what I'm more interested in is what you do with that giant folder of images, whatever, the different things you can do with it. Like might want to make it a movie barcode, and if you do want to do a barcode, I've made a website, and this has some limitations, I should say, but I have made a web-based tool for doing that. So if you have that folder of up to 9,999 images, you can load them into this web page and then generate a barcode of those. You can do a couple of other things like montages. I'll show you what those look like. But your mileage will vary just because the tool that I have here is limited because it's written in JavaScript, and so there's just certain things that you just can't do with JavaScript, not efficiently anyway. This is an example that's very hard to do in JavaScript, by the way, but this is something you can do with a tool called ImageJ. And this is a Z projection, so it's taking every frame from, in this case, Sleeping Beauty, and sort of looking at them on a Z axis, so like coming towards you. So they're all stacked up slightly transparently, and this is a composite image of the entire movie. Another really interesting way to look at a whole bunch of images together. And so if you're interested in this kind of thing, then that's something absolutely I can show you how to do. This is a montage where you're looking at a tiny thumbnail for each frame, or a frame every few seconds, and then you spray it out onto this kind of grid view. So that's another, it's an interesting way to look at a movie as well. And when you look at a movie or any other image set, like with these tools, you can start to see patterns or color palettes that you didn't notice before. It's a way of seeing differently, and that's what's important and interesting about this module. I really recommend this module. This is the one in the summer version. Sometimes I actually just require this module because I think it's pretty interesting. Okay, one more. Networks. This is where, this one's not as well explained, but I actually have a good example of this one. This is where you're using software to make an argument based on a network of connections. There's a tool called Palladio, which is pretty useful, which can also be used as a mapping tool. There's Kumu.io is another one that I've used that I like a lot. There's also something called Gephi. So basically, these are all different tools you can use. But this is an example of a project that a student did last year for this module. Alexander Rudenstiel did this. And this is a map of people in the Richmond, Virginia music scene that have been in bands together. So a small dot is a person and a big dot is a band. So you can kind of see these clusters of collaboration within this. So it's pretty interesting. He used a tool called Gephi to create this. And the nice thing about Gephi is that it gives you this HTML embed that you can put together into this web page. So that's what was easier for Alex in that case. I think Gephi otherwise is kind of a pain to set up and use, so I don't totally recommend it. I think probably I'm going to be steering you to Palladio because Palladio seems like the easiest, although I've just barely used it really. Okay, so that was kind of my quick intro to all of these modules. If you have any questions about these or anything else, this is a good time to ask about that on the stream. I will otherwise be wrapping up in a few minutes. So that was it. I mean, those are the quick introduction to the main methodology modules. I'll probably start off with text analysis on Wednesday just because I kind of have that material ready to go. So yeah, that's about it for today. Yeah, if you have any questions for me, this is a good time. If you want me to answer them on stream, this is a good time to ask. Otherwise, I'll wrap it up in a few minutes. But I hope you're all doing well. I hope you all get to go outside today. It's nice and sunny. It should be warm, but not quite as hot as yesterday afternoon. I've still not seen any squirrels at the feeder today, so they must be somewhere else. I haven't seen any squirrels at all today, come to think of it. But lots of birds have been coming and going. There's a mourning dove over there right now. I think mourning doves are funny because they always look so dumb. Like they all just, they look so like they have no idea what's going on. Like, I don't know. I'm sure they're interesting and intelligent creatures in various ways, but they just seem like checked out whenever you see them. And I think they're funny. They kind of like, they make whenever they fly, they chirp while they're flying, which I think is funny. Kind of like they're screaming as they're flying away, like, ah, like, I don't know. I think they're funny. You are working individually for this project, Brian. If you would like to collaborate, you're welcome to, but, oops, not that, individually. So if you would like to collaborate, you're welcome. So you're going to do the kind of the ad hoc collaboration thing where you join a channel, so other people in that channel will be working on the same kind of thing as you, but you won't be working on a group project per se. All right. Yeah, any more questions? Otherwise, I want to wrap it up and go see what's for lunch. I might mow the yard later. It's early to mow, but all my neighbors have mowed their yards, so maybe I should get on that too, so I'm not the last. I think those people haven't mowed theirs yet. I just met them the other day. Robert and Kathy, I think. Anyway, I see questions. Okay, no questions. Okay, good. All right, great. Well, I'll wrap it up. Thanks for watching. I will archive this on YouTube, of course, and then on Wednesday I will have something to guide you through in terms of learning a bit more about text analysis. So, have a great afternoon. I'll see you. Yep, there it is. Okay, see you later.